Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. The 1920s was a period of great change in America. With the economic boom, railroads, and large industries, cities were rapidly growing and new job opportunities and promises of wealth led many to have high hopes. However, during this time, much of the wealth and power were controlled by the railroads and the goods they transported. The goods loaded onto the trains and the valuable items carried in each car represented a fortune. This also presented an opportunity for criminals. And so, during this period, there was a group of criminals who decided to challenge the magnitude and security of the railroads. A gang led by Jimmy Parker was planning to execute one of the largest train robberies in American history. Jimmy, a former criminal, had committed numerous robberies throughout his life, but this one had to be big enough to corner the city and the state's railroad companies. Their goal wasn't just money. Jimmy saw this heist as a chance to become a legend in the criminal world. The gang consisted of experienced criminals, each excelling at their specific role. Jimmy's closest friend and right-hand man, Tommy Harris, would handle the logistical side of the heist, ensuring the safety of the gang during the robbery and preparing the escape plan. Tommy, known for his calm demeanor and strategic thinking, was meticulously planning every detail to ensure the heist wouldn't fail. One of the youngest members of the gang, Eddie Cooper, was known for his speed and bravery. Eddie would take care of neutralizing the passengers inside the train and would be at the forefront of the operation during the critical moments. In fact, Eddie's courage provided the gang with a significant advantage. The target of the heist was the Midwest Express, the most valuable train owned by one of America's largest railroad companies, which carried enormous amounts of gold, jewelry, and government bonds on its weekly route from New York to Chicago. Everyone had their eyes on this train. For these robbers, it was priceless. They had been tracking the Midwest Express's route for years, studying its movements, security measures, station stops, and even the train's speed. The night of the heist was planned for a rainy evening. The gang had long been waiting to carry out their plan at a sharp bend in the railroad track. Jimmy had decided that the bend, where the train would be traveling at high speed, was the perfect spot to strike without leaving a trace. Additionally, the rainy weather would make it harder for the police and security forces to intervene. The decision was clear. Everything was ready. The materials needed for the heist were carefully selected. The gang planned to use sleeping pills and narcotics to incapacitate the train's security personnel. They also carried a specially made signal jammer device to stop the train's conductor. All these plans were meticulously organized to ensure the heist would happen quickly and they could escape safely. Other gang members took on smaller but essential tasks to ensure the heist went smoothly. The police knew that there would only be a few security officers on the train, making the gang's job significantly easier. However, Jimmy was prepared in case any of the security officers survived the heist. And then, the big night arrived. As the rain intensified and the wind grew stronger, the robbers made their final preparations while the Midwest Express prepared to depart. Jimmy Parker went over the entire plan once more, ensuring everything was perfect and giving instructions to everyone. The gang members, as usual, followed the plan without question. Everything was set for the heist. As the Midwest Express sped along, the gang members were hiding around the bend where the train would pass. When the moment came, they moved with precision. Jimmy Parker and his gang not only had the opportunity to seize the money, but also to create a legend. The robbery was about to begin, and the city would soon witness some of its biggest crimes being brought to light. The rain darkened the night further. As the train raced from New York to Chicago, the powerful hum of the Midwest Express's engine broke the silence of the surroundings. The city lights had long faded behind, and the train, traveling through the forest, was illuminated only by flickering signal lights and the glow of the railroad lamps. Just a few hours later, when the train reached the bend, the plans would come into action. The gang was hidden in the dense forest along the railroad at the bend where they had planned the heist. Everything was silent, every move carefully calculated. Jimmy Parker, the always calm leader, gave the gang members one last set of instructions. His eyes were determined, but there was also excitement within him. Because this heist would bring not only wealth but also fame in the criminal world. There was no turning back now. They would either escape successfully, or this night would be their last. The gang members had prepared everything carefully. Tommy Harris was checking the key components necessary to bypass the train's security. The signal jammer device to stop. The train's conductor was in Tommy's hand, and he did a final check to ensure it was working properly. "Everything's ready," he said, only looking at Jimmy. Jimmy nodded and quickly moved forward. As they passed the bend, the train's rapid progress began to slow down. At Jimmy's signal, the gang members began to emerge from their hidden positions. Eddie Cooper, the youngest and bravest member of the gang, jumped out from the position he had hidden in just moments before, directly in the middle of the train's path. He quickly headed toward the front of the train. Eddie had a gun in hand, ready to face the approaching security officers inside the train. As the train approached within a kilometer, the other gang members moved into position at Jimmy's command. Each one took up their assigned spots and hid. Eddie swiftly climbed to the front of the train and disappeared from view. His job was to neutralize the security officers on the train. In the background, Tommy activated the signal jammer. The train suddenly started losing speed and came to a halt. After a while, the train stopped completely, and it was the perfect time for the gang to spring into action. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The moment everything would either go perfectly according to plan or turn into a massive disaster. Jimmy Parker, as the leader, stepped forward once again. The gang members, each aware of their tasks, began to move. Tommy Harris, after following Eddie's actions with the security officers, moved toward the rest of the train. Meanwhile, Jimmy and the others began to approach the passengers inside. One of the security officers was startled when Eddie suddenly leaped in front of him and drew his weapon, but Eddie was determined. "Don't move, we won't hurt anyone," he said in a firm voice. His words made it clear that the robbers were resolute in completing their task without causing harm. After successfully neutralizing the other security officer, Eddie quickly handed over his position to the other gang members. Now, the main part of the heist was about to begin. Jimmy quickly and decisively moved toward the passengers. At the same time, the other gang members began to disperse through the train. "No one stay still, everything will happen fast," he shouted as they prepared to neutralize the passengers. No one in the gang was panicking. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The robbers remained calm in response to the passengers' reactions. They were only after the money. None of them wanted to harm the passengers because they had one target in mind when planning this job: the fortune carried by the railroad. The train was filled with boxes, gold, and jewelry. This money was so great that it would determine the gang's future. After checking the remaining security officers, Eddie moved toward the back of the train. The other gang members started placing the money into boxes and looting the safes. Jimmy, meanwhile, helped gather the special items and precious stones on the train. He carefully placed each item, making sure everything was in its proper place. The heist was progressing rapidly. But Jimmy had one question on his mind. Why had the train been so easy to stop? Were the security measures inadequate? Despite nearly everything going according to plan, Jimmy couldn't stop thinking about this. After looting the largest portion of the safes, Tommy and the other gang members began to place the money into boxes and implement the escape plan. But at that moment, a strange movement outside the train began to raise their suspicions. Jimmy thought the gang needed to speed up the process and immediately took action. Time was running out for the heist to be completed successfully. Finally, the robbers had finished their work at every corner of the train. All the valuable items had been taken, the security officers were neutralized, and the passengers were safely held inside the train. Jimmy, Tommy, and Eddie, along with the rest of the gang, quickly left the train. The escape plan was working flawlessly, taking advantage of the calm of the train and successfully evading everyone's eyes. However, no one could predict what the gang would eventually face or how difficult the battle would become for this criminal gang in the future. The heist was going to bring much more than just a successful robbery. With the train coming to a stop, the robbers quickly activated their plans and began their escape journey. Jimmy Parker and his gang had to get the bags full of jewelry and cash to a safe place quickly. However, as the gang dispersed rapidly after the heist, making their way toward the escape route they had planned by the river, Detective John Thompson and his team were ready, tracking the truth. Only a few hours had passed since the heist. Jimmy and his gang had managed to reach a safe area, but Detective Thompson was thinking deeply about his plans to catch the gang, even if it was just one step closer. Thompson had gathered several clues about the robbers' escape route by reviewing security camera footage of the train and local intelligence reports. However, the thieves had been quite successful in covering their tracks. What bothered Thompson the most was how quickly everyone had disappeared after the robbery. The team had doubled their efforts to track Jimmy and the gang's movements. Secret witnesses in the city had started coming forward to contribute to the investigations that began immediately after the robbery. But there was one problem. No one had actually seen the robbers clearly. The gang had terrified the passengers on the train, quickly carrying out their demands and fleeing. As everyone's eyes were filled with fear and confusion, no one had been able to clearly see the faces of the thieves. Only careful observations were helping the detectives. Led by Detective Thompson, the team followed every path the suspicious gang members might have taken. Thompson, with his experience in intelligence gathering and evidence collection, slowly but steadily began collecting every clue about how the robbers had escaped. During this process, old criminal records and similarities with past robbery cases started to catch his attention. A week later, Detective Thompson and his team made a strange discovery at a small hotel in Chicago. There, Walter Dempsey, an old criminal associate of Jimmy Parker, had been seen in connection with past crimes and had recently made contact with the underground market in the city. Dempsey had committed major robberies years ago, but he had been released because there was no concrete evidence linking him to any crime. However, when Thompson's team started investigating Dempsey, they realized he was involved with the gang and had a connection to Jimmy Parker. As Thompson tracked Dempsey's movements, he began to suspect that the former partner might have leaked details about the heist. But when they pursued him, Dempsey somehow managed to escape. This incident made Detective Thompson think that a bigger game was being played. It seemed like the entire robbery was just the beginning. Dempsey's escape had taught him something very important. The robbers weren't just a group of criminals, they were part of a network, and that network was much bigger than he had originally thought. Many other leads followed. As Thompson and his team tracked each gang member, they worked with local police to uncover missing key evidence. The gang members were moving cautiously at every step. They only had portable items on them, and it was becoming increasingly clear that behind everything was an organized crime syndicate. At night, Detective Thompson would secretly observe the areas where the gang members were hiding. While tracking suspicious movements, he was also waiting for the right opportunity to catch them. Thompson continued to follow the criminals, not alone, but with his team. However, he knew that every move carried a risk. The robbers were experienced and strategic. Any wrong move could cause the detectives to lose track of one of the suspects. All of this was happening while Jimmy Parker was still missing. He had managed to escape with the remaining members of the gang, along with a large sum of money and jewelry. But Detective Thompson and his team were doing everything they could to catch them. For several weeks, while the robbers remained at large, the detectives continued to track their movements. One night, they found a new lead in an abandoned factory in Chicago. Thompson and his team, with great skill, decided to surround the factory and capture the criminals inside. The gang members were hiding in the factory, and their audacity made them even more dangerous. Thompson hoped that everything would come to an end quickly, but at the same time he was on high alert. The detectives chasing this robbery were only a part of the danger sweeping the city, and there was a much darker plan behind this gang. Detective John Thompson and his team were putting in a great effort to track down Jimmy Parker and his gang. However, with each step they took, they found themselves taking one more step back. The gang members were so careful that they could sense every move the detectives made. The gang was quickly erasing any trace or evidence that could bring them trouble. Every day a new trail was lost, and every night they were stepping into a new dark plan. Detective Thompson was beginning to lose the excitement he had felt at the start of the robbery investigation. At that moment, this was something much bigger than a mere criminal investigation. It was as if, with every step he took, pulling at the end of a rope, the rope was getting longer and pulling him into a mystery. Thompson had been tracking the gang's movements for a week. The investigation that had started at an abandoned factory in Chicago quickly expanded to other locations. However, that morning, an unexpected clue emerged. One of Jimmy Parker's former associates claimed to have found traces of the gang member's criminal past at a long-lost material warehouse. Detective Thompson and his team immediately sprang into action, beginning to investigate this new lead. The warehouse was located in one of Chicago's outer neighborhoods, in an old industrial district. It was surrounded by abandoned workplaces, and securing the area was nearly impossible. However, the detectives had a gut feeling about this warehouse. As Thompson and his team approached the warehouse, they noticed an old material transport vehicle had been left behind. Moving backward, they found old criminal case files buried beneath a large pile of boxes. The files were covered in dirt, but when carefully opened, they revealed many details about the gang's past. "This isn't just a robbery," said Thompson as he examined the contents of the files. "This is part of a large criminal network that has been organized for years." The files contain detailed accounts of past robberies committed by Jimmy Parker and his gang in Chicago's criminal world, along with their connections and dealings with creditors. However, one file stood out from the rest. It was labeled only "Caution" and was heavily concealed. This file caught Thompson's attention. It contained several names and encrypted notes. Thompson believed this file was a strong clue that the gang was connected to a much broader network. After reviewing the file, the team realized that the gang had not only carried out train robberies, but was also involved in many other crimes. These crimes included large-scale arms trafficking, drug dealing, and bank heists. Jimmy Parker and his gang had become experienced in various criminal activities and had established a powerful position in the city's underworld. As new information about the hostages and gang members came to light, another witness reported that the gang moved without being seen and held secret meetings that made their crimes even more complicated. This witness claimed that the gang's most important members were not committing crimes just to make money, but were aiming to take control of a large power in the city. Parker and his team were not just planning a heist, they were looking to build an underground empire for all sorts of dark deeds in the city. After sharing these findings, Reynolds and Thompson realized they were in a much more complicated situation. This was no longer just a train robbery case. The gang's actions had grown to the point where they posed a danger to the entire city. And the most dangerous part was that the city's residents, along with the whole community, were unaware of these crimes. Thompson decided to trace the missing bag from the robbery in order to catch the truth amidst all this complex information. Could the belongings left behind by the gang provide more clues? The detectives began working to find Jimmy Parker's missing bags. The bag had become a very important symbol. Inside it, there could be encrypted documents and cards. One night, as the city was engulfed in dark rain, they found the location where the bag had gone missing. The spot where the bag had disappeared was an isolated area. It was an ideal place for criminals to hide, with underground tunnels. Thompson and his team spent the night searching these tunnels. The conclusions they could draw from there might help them expose the gang's highly secretive operations. All these developments made Detective Thompson realize that he was facing more than just a robbery case. He was trying to solve a much larger mystery. Chasing the robbers required much more than just pursuing justice. The real power lay behind the mystery that was engulfing the city, and with each step Thompson was getting closer to uncovering the trail of a grand organization. But there was more. The gang was no longer just committing crimes for money. They had started moving to gain power as well. And as Thompson began to realize how much bigger this plan was, he decided to dig deeper with every step. Detective John Thompson, along with his team, continued to track the gang. Everything had become more complex and dangerous. A train robbery was just a part of a massive criminal network, and this network was not only aiming for money, but also for power. As Thompson realized how far Jimmy Parker and his gang's goals reached, he decided to dig even deeper with every passing day. But one question grew larger in his mind. Was this huge criminal organization really just Parker's? Or was there someone behind the scenes who could manage it all without anyone noticing? As the team examined the bag found in the secret underground, passages and the encrypted documents inside, some details began to emerge that they had previously overlooked. The gang members were not just involved in train robberies and bank heists, but had also established connections with certain businessmen from the city's major industries and business circles. Thompson began to investigate these businessmen, looking into each of their roles in shady dealings and their connections with Parker. However, this research led him in an unexpected direction. One evening, an informant who had witnessed one of the gang's most secret meetings in one of the city's distant areas came forward. This person claimed that Jimmy Parker had been meeting with Leonard Madsen, a wealthy businessman who had previously had no criminal ties. Madsen was one of the city's largest employers and held a significant position in the city's business world. Thompson had never heard of Madsen before, but the name immediately caught his attention. Madsen was known as one of the city's most reliable businessmen, but there were some mysterious past events and rumors that suggested his business dealings were only apparently legitimate. Thompson then began to think that Madsen might have a much more important role in the gang's operations. Investigations into Madsen's house revealed another interesting discovery. Detectives found that the businessman's large mansion was located in an area that had been monitored by security cameras for a long time and was connected to the government's Secret Service. These unauthorized observations of Madsen's house gave the detectives a crucial clue about how the businessman was connected to the gang. Not only was Madsen a powerful figure in the business world, but he also had links to some dark connections in the criminal world. Thompson immediately decided to gather information about Madsen and track his movements. This could be the key to solving the entire criminal network. The detectives noticed that Madsen frequently stayed at a location outside the city, where he managed to cover his tracks. This, in Thompson's view, indicated that Madsen had a role that went far beyond being just a businessman. A person with strong connections in both the business world and the criminal world had always been one of the most dangerous individuals. One morning, Detective Thompson and his team decided to visit one of Madsen's most frequent destinations, a small but luxurious hotel. The hotel was located in a secluded, almost abandoned part of the city. However, when they entered the hotel, they encountered an old security guard who had recorded the secret meetings Madsen held there. This security guard revealed that the businessman had been holding very secretive meetings not only with local crime gangs but also with high-ranking officials in the government. Madsen met with these individuals to finance major industrial projects and organize some dirty deals related to the city's criminal activities. Learning that Madsen was connected not only with criminals but also with powerful figures in the government raised a huge question mark in Thompson's mind. This showed him that things were not going as he had expected. Madsen was not only a part of a large criminal organization, but he was also making secret deals with the individuals who were leading that organization. Thompson then realized that Jimmy Parker's gang was merely a pawn in a much larger game. Madsen and other figures of power were the ones truly controlling the city, making decisions based on their own criminal network. One night, a raid on one of Madsen's most frequented business locations uncovered a large quantity of weapons and narcotics. Madsen's true identity became even clearer during this operation. The gang's crimes were not just financially driven, but aimed at controlling and manipulating the society itself, which was now laid bare before the detectives. Madsen was not just the wealthy businessman everyone knew. He was deeply involved in darker dealings. Now, Thompson and his team decided to make a final move to capture him. Reaching Madsen had become an absolute necessity. However, the complex web of powerful connections surrounding him meant that the detectives had to tread carefully. Going after Madsen could endanger the entire city because he was more than just a businessman. Thompson now considered the possibility that Madsen was one of the hidden leaders of the city. With every step and every new clue, they were getting closer, but they were also facing greater dangers. Solving the mystery of Madsen's true identity and uncovering the dark corners of the Gang and criminal organization became the primary goal of Detective Thompson and his team. But achieving this goal came with great peril. Thompson realized that their investigation into Madsen had grown beyond simply catching a criminal. Now it was clear that the man they were chasing wasn't just behind a robbery. They were uncovering an immense criminal network and a colossal power structure. Madsen's identity as a businessman had reached beyond the criminal world, touching even the deepest corners of the state. On one side, the detectives were fighting to shed light on this dark world. On the other, a society was battling against Madsen's crimes and their devastating impact on the city. Secret meetings, arms smuggling, money laundering, and corruption were eating away at the city. As Thompson delved deeper into the mystery, his team faced constant threats and traps. They were getting closer to catching Madsen, but the price for doing so would be high. During Madsen's last meeting, a bomb planted by the police exploded. As the team prepared for a raid targeting Madsen's next heist, a betrayal occurred within their ranks. An old friend of Jimmy Parker, one of the key members of the gang, had leaked information to Madsen before the detectives could close in on him. Madsen felt one step ahead when he confronted the police. This was a devastating blow for Thompson. The compromised security systems and the internal betrayal had made everything even more complicated. Madsen had managed to outsmart not only local crime gangs but also the systems the detectives trusted. As Thompson's team tracked Madsen's movements, they discovered another planned attack targeting the heart of the city. They made one final decision to take down the entire gang and its powerful connections. However, this move wouldn't just target the criminals. It would also implicate the city's highest-ranking figures. One night, Thompson and his team raided one of Madsen's favorite secret meeting spots for the last time. However, things didn't go as planned. Not only was Madsen there, but several of the city's most powerful businessmen and crime lords were also present. As Thompson and his team quietly approached, gunshots suddenly rang out. Someone had fired at the team. Madsen's traps and security network had become even more intricate by the second. In this raid, the detectives discovered just how much control Madsen's gang had over the city and the true extent of the power behind it. Madsen was more than just a criminal. He was at the center of a system. Thompson confronted Madsen and other members of the gang during the operation, but Madsen, unexpectedly stepping forward, locked eyes with the detective and said, "You knew this was coming, didn't you? That everything is connected to us, but this is just the beginning." His words shocked Thompson even more. Madsen knew the true target of the police and their ultimate intentions. This revelation hit Thompson like a hammer. The entire network was much larger and deeper than he had ever imagined, stretching far beyond a few robberies and murders. In that moment, the only thing on the detective's mind was that the true threat to the city's greatest power was not just money and influence, but the hidden organization behind these criminals. The stakes were far higher than he had realized, and the implications were chilling. After further investigation, Thompson and his team discovered that Madsen's connections reached far outside the city, even into the deepest corners of the government. This discovery posed a threat not only to the city's police force but to the very security of the nation itself. Madsen and his men weren't just part of a local crime gang. They were integral members of a vast and intricate criminal empire. In the end, Thompson and his team managed to capture Madsen and the other criminals in a highly dangerous operation. But the cost of their success was immense. As Madsen was about to be arrested, he shot Thompson a final menacing look and said, "You think this is the end? We were just the beginning." His words were a dire warning that the fight was far from over. Even after Madsen's arrest, the city's secret connections and the remnants of the criminal network continued to linger. The traces of destruction and war hadn't left the city. Madsen and his gang's dark influence continued to threaten everything they had worked so hard to protect. But Thompson, resolute as ever, knew that he couldn't let the city fall into the hands of these powerful forces. He was prepared for one final battle, to restore the city to its former state. This last confrontation would not only be about justice, but also a victory for all the power, courage, and resilience that the city's people had left. Thompson understood that this was no longer just about capturing criminals. It was a fight for the soul of the city itself.